The city of Portland had a way of hiding its darkest secrets in the folds of the night. When rain poured endlessly and the fog rolled low across the streets, it seemed almost as if the city wanted to wash itself clean of the pain it carried. But some stains could not be erased, not even by the heaviest storm. On one such night, when the rain hammered rooftops and turned sidewalks into mirrors of broken neon light, Officer Ethan Cole and his steadfast partner Rex, a battle-worn German shepherd, were making their midnight rounds. Most nights were quiet, almost too quiet. Long stretches of silence broken only by the hum of the engine or the occasional distant siren, but Ethan knew better than to mistake silence for peace. Portland nights could change in the blink of an eye. Ethan, 35 years old and seasoned by years of service, sat behind the wheel of his patrol car, his storm-gray eyes scanning the slick pavement of Burnside Avenue. His face bore the calm expression of a man used to staring down the worst parts of humanity, though behind that steadiness lived countless memories he rarely spoke about. Cases where justice had slipped through his hands, nights that left scars no one else could see. His broad shoulders and lean frame carried the weight of duty, but it was his quiet, trustworthy smile, rare yet genuine, that made children run toward him instead of away. Beside him, Rex sat tall and alert. Age had marked the dog with silver threads woven into his dark sable coat, and an old scar along his hind leg told the story of a violent struggle long ago. One ear stood proud, the other permanently bent, a reminder of battles survived. Yet despite the years, his eyes burned with loyalty, sharpness, and an almost human understanding. Where Ethan's demeanor was calm and steady, Rex's energy was coiled, ready to spring into action without hesitation. He was not just a dog. He was Ethan's partner, protector, and the one creature Ethan trusted without question. The rain drummed endlessly on the windshield, and Ethan let out a tired sigh as the clock on the dash blinked 12:47 a.m. He reached down and scratched Rex absently behind the ear. "Almost time to circle back," he muttered. "Then we call it a night." But Rex wasn't listening. His ears pricked forward, body stiffening. He had heard something Ethan hadn't, yet. A second later, Ethan caught it too. At first faint, muffled by the storm, then clearer, sharper. A cry. Not the angry shout of a drunk stumbling through the alleys, not the echo of some late-night argument. This was different. Higher, shrill, fragile, the unmistakable cry of a baby. Ethan's pulse jumped. He rolled the window down, leaning into the damp air. The sound sliced through the night, bouncing off soaked bricks and dripping fire escapes. Rex gave a sharp bark, muscles tightening, then sprang out of the patrol car, paws splashing through puddles. "Rex, wait!" Ethan called, already pushing his own door open, flashlight in hand. The dog led the way, nose low, growl rumbling as he followed the scent and sound through a narrow alley. The air smelled of mildew and rot, dumpsters overflowing with soggy cardboard, and broken furniture crowding the walls. Rain streaked over graffiti-stained bricks, and the baby's cries grew louder with every step. Suddenly, Rex stopped. His body angled protectively, hackles raised, teeth bared at the darkness in the corner. Ethan lifted his beam, and the sight froze him where he stood. There, slumped against the wall, was a young woman. She couldn't have been older than 28. Her thin frame shivered beneath a drenched sweater that clung to her skin. Her jeans were torn, her bare feet caked in mud. Strands of dark brown hair stuck to her pale, bruised face. Her head hung limply to one side, lips cracked, breath shallow. She was unconscious, barely holding on. But what tore into Ethan's chest wasn't just her condition. At her feet, wrapped in a fraying gray blanket, lay a newborn. The baby's tiny fists punched at the air as it screamed, face red and scrunched in terror. So small, so fragile, left to face the cold cruelty of the world with no protection. "Dear God," Ethan whispered. his voice breaking through the patter of rain. He dropped to his knees, lifting the soaked blanket and pulling the baby close to his chest. The infant's skin was icy, its cries piercing the night. Ethan wrapped his jacket around the child, shielding it from the storm, murmuring softly, "It's okay. I've got you now." Rex lowered himself beside the mother, pressing his warm body against her side as though lending her what little strength he could. With surprising gentleness, he nudged her shoulder with his muzzle, whining softly, urging her to wake. Ethan shifted the baby to one arm and pressed 2 fingers against the woman's neck. A faint pulse, weak but present. Relief washed through him. The baby's cries slowly softened, comforted by the steady thump of Ethan's heartbeat. But Rex wasn't calm. His head lifted suddenly, ears pricked. He sniffed the air, growled deep and low. Ethan followed his gaze toward the alley's entrance. The air carried something bitter, cigarette smoke, faint but fresh. Someone had been here, someone who might still be close. His grip on the baby tightened. Whoever had abandoned this mother and child in the rain might not be far, and Ethan's gut told him this wasn't just misfortune, it was danger. "All right," he murmured, his eyes sweeping the shadows. "Let's get them out of here." He slid an arm beneath the woman's shoulders, lifting her gently. She was far lighter than she should have been, her body weakened from hunger, exhaustion, and pain. With the baby pressed securely against, his chest and the mother's limp form held tight, Ethan stood, carrying both fragile lives in his arms. "Come on, Rex." The shepherd moved ahead, growling softly, eyes darting toward the dark as he guarded the narrow path back to the patrol car. Even as they reached the street, Rex didn't relax. His stance told Ethan that danger lingered just out of reach, watching. At the car, Ethan eased the woman onto the back seat, laying her carefully across the bench. He tucked the baby close to her, though the tiny fists clung stubbornly to his shirt until Rex leaned in, resting his warm muzzle beside the infant's head. The baby hiccuped once, then sighed, curling its fingers against Rex's fur as if finding comfort in the dog's presence. For a fleeting moment, under the red glow of the patrol car's dome light, they looked like a family, broken, fragile, but together. An unconscious mother, a crying child, a weary officer, and a loyal dog standing guard against the storm. Ethan slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. Rain sheeted across the windshield as he flipped on the siren. "Hold on," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "I'll get you safe." As the car surged through the rain-soaked streets, Rex curled protectively around the woman and her child, his eyes fixed on the window, daring the world to challenge him. And though the siren wailed and the city lights blurred, Ethan couldn't shake the thought pressing in his chest. This was no accident. Somewhere in the smoke-scented dark, someone was still watching. The hospitals. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly as the storm dragged on outside. The emergency ward was restless, even at 2 in the morning. Nurses rushing, phones ringing, footsteps echoing across polished floors. In one quiet room, Anna Miller stirred. Slowly, painfully, her eyes opened. Fear clouded them. Exhaustion hollowed them. She blinked, searching desperately, her lips cracking as she whispered hoarsely, "Lily. Where is she?" "Easy. You're safe." The steady voice drew her gaze. Ethan Cole rose from the chair beside her bed, sleeves rolled up, fatigue written across his face, yet steadiness in his posture. In his arms, wrapped in fresh linen, lay the tiny newborn. Her chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm, small fists tucked close to her body. "Your daughter's right here," Ethan said softly, stepping closer so Anna could see. "She's fine. She just needed warmth and milk. The nurses took care of her." Anna's gaze locked on the child, her eyes brimming with tears. Relief flooded her gaunt features. She reached out with trembling fingers, but stopped midway, wincing as pain shot through her ribs. Ethan stepped forward, carefully settling Lily against her chest. The baby stirred, released a small sigh, then nestled against her mother as if the world outside no longer mattered. At the foot of the bed lay Rex, his massive frame curled but watchful. His head rested on his paws, amber-brown eyes open and alert. He lifted his head as Anna moved, ears twitching. When Lily shifted and let out a whimper, Rex stood, stepped close, and lowered his head to the edge of the bed. With gentle patience, he allowed the infant's tiny hand to brush against his bent ear. The baby stopped fussing instantly. Anna stared, surprised, as if she couldn't quite believe an animal could be so gentle. "He's my partner," Ethan explained. "Name's Rex. He's been with me for years. He won't let anything happen to you or Lily." Anna nodded faintly, but her eyes drifted downward, heavy with something more than fatigue. Her frail hands smoothed over Lily's blanket, as though every motion anchored her back to reality. Moments later, the door opened with a soft creak, and a nurse stepped in. Mrs. Carter was in her late 60s, short and slightly hunched, with a cascade of silver hair pinned in a bun. Deep smile lines framed her mouth, though her eyes carried the quiet weight of someone who had seen too many nights like this one. She had worked in the hospital for decades, known for her firm kindness. Patients trusted her, perhaps because she spoke the truth without varnish. She checked Anna's vitals, her touch gentle but clinical. As she pulled back the gown's sleeve, her eyes hardened at the sight of fresh and fading bruises that littered Anna's forearm. Purple and yellow blotches wrapped around her wrist, unmistakable. Marks of force. Mrs. Carter said nothing at first, but her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, turning to Ethan, she murmured low enough for Anna not to hear. "This isn't just exhaustion. Those bruises tell a story." Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced at Anna, who avoided his eyes, her gaze fixed on her baby's small face. "Anna," he said, gently, crouching beside her bed. "I need you to be honest with me. How did this happen? The bruises? The collapse in the alley? Someone hurt you, didn't they?" For a long time, silence hung. The rain outside tapped steadily against the window, as if urging her to speak. Anna's lips trembled. She looked younger in that moment, like a girl barely grown, trapped between fear and the desperate instinct to protect her child. Finally, her voice broke free, little more than a whisper. "My husband, Daniel, he doesn't stop. Every time I thought it was the last, it got worse. After Lily was born, I couldn't. I had to run. I thought if I kept moving, he couldn't find us. But I have no family here, no money, no place to go. That alley was the only shelter left." Her shoulders shook as she spoke. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. She clutched Lily closer, as though the baby was the only shield she had. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle like a stone in his chest. Domestic violence was a shadow that too often hid behind closed doors, leaving scars deeper than what anyone could see. His hand instinctively brushed Rex's head. The shepherd pressed against him, grounding his thoughts. "You don't have to go back to him," Ethan said firmly. "You and Lily are safe now. Well, make sure of it." Anna shook her head slowly. "He always finds me. He said I'd never escape him." Rex growled softly, not at Anna, but at the invisible specter of the man who had broken her spirit. Anna startled at the sound, then looked down, seeing the shepherd's watchful eyes. She found, if not courage, at least a glimmer of reassurance. Mrs. Carter finished her notes on the chart, then stepped closer to Anna. "Listen to me, dear," she said, her voice carrying the weight of truth. "What you've survived is terrible, but you are not alone. There are shelters, programs, people who fight for women like you. I've seen too many come in like this. Some never leave alive. You still can." Anna bit her lip, torn between disbelief and hope. She leaned back against the pillow, exhausted, eyes closing briefly as she breathed in Lily's warmth. Ethan stood, resting a hand on the bed rail. For now, you rest. The hospital will keep you here a few days. I'll talk to my department. We'll figure out how to protect you. But Anna, when the time comes, you'll need to be willing to stand against him. She nodded faintly, though fear still shadowed her features. Her eyes drifted to Rex again. The shepherd had moved to sit at the foot of her bed, his posture proud, his gaze unwavering. Lily let out a soft murmur in her sleep, her small hand still tangled in Rex's fur. For the first time since waking, a fragile smile crossed Anna's lips. "Thank you," she whispered. It was unclear whether she meant Ethan, Rex, Mrs. Carter, or all three. Outside, the rain began to soften, its rhythm gentler against the glass. Portland remained cloaked in gray, but inside that hospital room, amid bruises, tears, and a fragile newborn's sigh, a faint thread of safety had been woven. It was thin, perhaps, but strong enough to hold the night at bay. The morning light over Portland was pale and watery, leaking through low clouds that still carried the weight of the previous night's storm. The city stirred with its usual rhythm, commuters waiting for buses, shopkeepers lifting shutters, but in Ethan's mind, the streets looked different. He had spent the night stationed near Anna's room, checking in between reports, with the Rex sleeping lightly at his feet. Now, with the hospital releasing Anna under his protection, he knew the next step was crucial, finding a place where she and her baby would be safe. Anna walked slowly beside him as they left the hospital. Her hospital gown had been replaced with donated clothes, an oversized gray hoodie, faded jeans, and slip-on shoes from the charity box. Though clean, the clothes seemed too big for her frail frame. She carried Lily wrapped snugly in a fresh blanket. The baby's cheeks were pink, eyes half-lidded, in the soft haze of newborn drowsiness. Anna's shoulders hunched, as if bracing against a wind that hadn't come. Ethan kept his tone steady. "There's a place not far from here, a shelter for women who've gone through situations like yours. They'll give you a room, food, and counselors to help. It's not permanent, but it's safe." Anna clutched Lily tighter and nodded, though the tremor in her lips betrayed her fear. "Safe," she whispered as thought-esting the word. Rex padded at their side, his thick coat still damp from the night's rain. His gait was steady but alert, tail low, ears twitching with each sound from the street. More than once his nose lifted as if catching scents on the wind that Ethan couldn't sense. He stayed close to Anna and Lily, his body forming a barrier between them and the rest of the world. The shelter was housed in a converted church on the east side. Its brick walls bore ivy creeping along cracked mortar, and a cross, weathered and bent, perched above the arched doorway. Inside, the air smelled faintly of coffee and laundry detergent. The entry hall buzzed with quiet activity. Children whispering in corners, women carrying folded laundry, a staff member guiding someone down a hall. Waiting for them was Sarah Donnelly, the shelter's coordinator. Sarah was in her early 50s, tall and slender with auburn hair strewn in a loose braid down her back. Her eyes were green, sharp yet kind, the kind of eyes that had learned to read pain without judgment. She wore a simple cardigan and dark skirt, her hands clasped in front of her. Sarah had been a social worker for nearly 3 decades, her resolve shaped by years of seeing women walk in with broken bones and broken spirits. She carried herself with quiet authority, the sort that made people feel safe without ever needing to raise her voice. "Officer Cole," she greeted, extending her hand. "We got your call. This must be Anna." Anna shifted uneasily, tightening her hold on Lily. Sarah's smile was gentle, never forcing comfort where it wasn't yet earned. "You're welcome here," she said softly. We'll make sure you and your baby have a room of your own." Rex sniffed the air and moved closer to Anna, as if to reassure her that this place was in fact safe. Sarah bent slightly, her hand hovering just short of his head. "And this must be Rex. You can tell a lot about a man by the way his dog looks at him. This one's loyal." Ethan gave the faintest smile. "More than loyal. He saved them last night." Sarah led them down a hall to a modest room with 2 twin beds pushed together and a dresser against the wall. There were fresh sheets, a crib tucked into the corner, and a window overlooking a garden where yellow tulips tried to bloom through stubborn soil. Anna's eyes filled with tears as she laid Lily gently into the crib. For a moment she stood there silently, just watching the baby sleep, the weight of exhaustion finally tugging her shoulders downward. "I'll leave you to settle in," Sarah said, giving her arm a reassuring squeeze. "Rest while you can. The staff is here if you need anything." Ethan waited until Sarah had stepped out before turning to Anna. "I'll come back to check on you. If you need me, the staff knows how to reach me. And Rex," he gestured to the shepherd who had laid himself in front of the door like a sentry. "Well, he doesn't leave people he's sworn to protect." Anna's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice wasmall. But there was something steadier in it than the night before. Later that afternoon, after ensuring the paperwork was done, Ethan drove back to the alley where he had first found them. The rain had washed away much of the grime, but the shadows still clung stubbornly between the walls. Rex leapt down beside him, nose twitching instantly. He sniffed the air, then lowered his muzzle to the damp ground, tail stiff. "Find it, boy," Ethan said. Rex prowled toward the corner where Anna had collapsed the night before. His paws scraped against a pile of soaked cardboard near the dumpster. Suddenly, he dug with quick, sharp movements, pulling away refuse until his teeth caught on something metallic. He dragged it out and dropped it at Ethan's boots. A lighter. Its casing was dented, the silver worn but clearly engraved with the initials DM. Ethan crouched, his jaw tightening. Daniel Miller. He remembered. The name from the database. Multiple arrests for assault, at least 12 restraining orders in other counties. Never a long sentence, always slipping through legal cracks. Now he was hunting his wife. "Good work, Rex," Ethan said, slipping the lighter into an evidence bag. Back at the precinct, Ethan presented the item to his lieutenant, a stout man named Frank Harris with thinning gray hair and a habit of rubbing his temples when cases piled up. Frank was pragmatic, often skeptical, but when Ethan laid the bag on his desk, his brows furrowed. "You're saying the husband left this behind?" Frank asked. "Rex tracked it," Ethan replied. "The initials match. His record speaks for itself." Anna's terrified, and she has every reason to be. Frank sighed, leaning back in his chair. "We'll flag Miller, but you know as well as I do, until he makes a direct move, our hands are tied. Protective custody isn't automatic." Ethan clenched, his jaw but nodded. "Then I'll keep watch myself." As he left the office, Rex trotted at his side, the shepherd's ears pricked, body taut as though he understood the danger circling closer. Ethan's hand brushed the fur along Rex's neck. "We'll protect them," he murmured. Rex gave a low, affirming whine. That night, as Portland's city lights flickered across the river, Anna lay awake in the shelter, staring at Lily's tiny chest rising and falling in sleep. For the first time in weeks, she was not in the cold, not in an alley, not running through streets with no destination, but the shadow of Daniel's threat pressed against her mind. She drew Lily closer, whispering, "I won't let him take you." In the hallway outside, Rex rested at the door, body stretched across the threshold like a wall of muscle and fur. His ears flicked at every sound, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the low light. The shepherd did not sleep deeply. He was waiting, guarding, ready. The rain had eased over Portland, but the air still carried the damp heaviness of recent storms. Outside the brick walls of the shelter, the streets were alive with muted weekend. Traffic, the rattle of buses, the hiss of tires over wet pavement, the faint chatter from a corner cafe. Inside, the shelter's halls hummed with quieter sounds, children playing in the common room, the shuffle of staff members carrying laundry, and the occasional soft murmur of women sharing stories behind closed doors. It had been 3 days since Anna and Lily had arrived. For the first time in weeks, Anna had slept without fear, though each morning she still woke startled, as though expecting a shadow at the door. On the third morning, Ethan made his routine visit. He had come in plain clothes this time, dark jeans, a gray jacket, his badge clipped discreetly at his belt. He wanted Anna to feel less like she was under official watch and more like she was simply being cared for. Rex padded beside him, his coat brushed and gleaming, though his posture remained vigilant. He had grown accustomed to the shelter halls, children whispering, "Doggy," as they pointed, but he never let his guard down. Anna met them in the small dining room, Lily cradled against her chest. Her face looked less hollow now, some color returning to her cheeks. But here ye's remained rimmed with sleepless circles. She managed a faint smile when she saw Rex reaching down with her free hand to stroke his bent ear. "He makes Lily calm," she murmured, almost like she knows he's protecting us. Ethan nodded. That's exactly what he's doing. Their conversation was cut short by the sudden sound of shouting outside. Harsh, angry words sliced through the calm of the morning. Staff members froze. A child burst into tears. Ethan's head snapped toward the entry hall, his instincts kicking. In. Rex had already risen, hackles raised, a growl rumbling in his chest. Through the glass doors, a man stood in the street, his voice booming with rage. Daniel Miller. Daniel was in his early 30s, tall but lean, with a wiry build that spoke of restless energy rather than strength. His dark hair was cropped unevenly, as though cut without care, and a scruffy beard shadowed his jaw. His eyes were sharp, feverish, the kind that didn't see people but possessions. He wore a heavy jacket, dirt-stained and damp, the kind a man might sleep in for days. The bitterness in his voice carried across the street. "Nah, you can't hide from me. Bring my wife and daughter out here now." Anna's face went pale. Her arms tightened around Lily, and she stumbled back against the wall. "He found me," she whispered, shaking. "He said he always would." Ethan stepped in front of her. "Stay here," he ordered firmly, then gestured for Sarah Donnelly, the shelter coordinator, who had hurried into the hall. Sarah's face tightened, her green eyes sharp. She placed a steadying hand on Anna's shoulder. "Go back to your room, dear. Don't listen to him. You're safe in here." Ethan pushed open the doors, Rex pacing at his side. "Did it!" The shepherd's growl deepened, teeth flashing as he planted himself between Daniel and the entrance, his amber eyes locked on the man with unflinching fury. Daniel flinched slightly, but straightened, sneering at the sight of the dog. "You think that mud can stop me?" Daniel shouted, jabbing a finger toward the door. "That's my wife in there, my baby. You can't keep them from me." Ethan's voice was steady, cold steel beneath calm words. "Daniel Miller, this is a private facility. You're trespassing. Leave now." Daniel laughed bitterly, taking a step closer. "Or what? You'll sick your dog on me? She's mine, officer. She belongs with me." At his movement, Rex barked one sharp, deafening crack that echoed against the brick walls. Daniel froze, the bravado faltering under the weight of the shepherd's stance. The dog's entire body was a wall of muscle and threat, his eyes burning with a promise of violence if the man advanced even a step closer. Other staff members had called for backup, and within minutes, another patrol car pulled up. Ethan's colleague, Officer Jenna Price stepped out. Jenna was in her late 20s, compact and strong, with short blonde hair tucked neatly under her cap. Known among the department for her quick temper against abusers, her blue eyes flashed as she approached. "Daniel Miller," she barked, her hand already resting on her holster. "You're done here. Move along." Daniel's lips curled, his eyes darting, between Ethan, Jenna, and the snarling Rex. "This isn't over," he spat. "She can't hide forever. I'll come back for her." Then, with a bitter laugh, he backed away, his boots splashing in the shallow puddles before he disappeared down the block. The tension hung in the air long after he was gone. Rex didn't relax until Ethan laid a hand on his head, giving a sharp command. The shepherd sat back, though his ears remained pry-cricked, gaze following the path Daniel had taken. Inside, Anna collapsed into a chair, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped Lily. Sarah crouched beside her, speaking in soothing tones, while Mrs. Carter, the nurse who had checked in earlier, arrived from her off-duty volunteer shift carrying tea. "It's all right now," she murmured, though her eyes betrayed deep concern. Later that evening, when the immediate crisis had calmed, Ethan returned to the area outside the shelter with Rex. The rain had started again, misting down gently. Rex lowered his nose to the ground, sniffing intently. He tugged Ethan toward a cluster of bushes near the edge of the property. Digging with powerful paws, he unearthed a crumpled, mud-stained jacket. Ethan lifted it carefully. Inside the pocket, he found half SM smoked cigarettes and a matchbook. It reeked of stale smoke, exactly the scent Rex had growled at on the night they found Anna. Ethan bagged the evidence, his stomach turning. Daniel hadn't just stumbled across the shelter. He had been watching, waiting. When Ethan showed Anna the jacket the next day, her body shook with fear. "He told me once," she whispered, her voice breaking, "that even if I ran to the ends of the earth, he'd never let me go, that I'd always be his." Tears streamed down her face as she clutched Lily closer. Ethan crouched beside her, his storm-gray eyes steady. "He's wrong. You're not his. And as long as I'm here, he won't touch you or your daughter." Rex pressed against Anna's knee, his warm presence anchoring her trembling body. Lily stirred, opened her tiny fists, and settled again, soothed by the shepherd's steady breathing. For the first time that day, Anna looked up, a flicker of hope piercing through the fear. The days following Daniel's outburst at the shelter were tense. Anna seldom left her room except to walk Lily around the small garden, always accompanied by Sarah or another staff member. Her eyes carried the weight of constant dread, as though every shadow might be him. Rex sensed it too. He rarely left her doorway when Ethan was away, his body a living wall against any threat. Ethan knew this wasn't sustainable. Daniel wouldn't simply vanish into the night. It was time to move from defense to pursuit. Ethan arrived at the precinct early Monday morning, the sky still pale with dawn. He wore his uniform neatly pressed, though the lines under his eyes betrayed the sleepless nights. At his side, Rex trotted confidently, his sable coat brushed clean, but his demeanor taut with readiness. The precinct smelled of coffee and paper, the hum of officers preparing for another day echoing off the walls. Inside the briefing room, Lieutenant Frank Harris leaned against the table, rubbing his temples as usual. Around him sat a few other officers. Among them, Detective Paul Ramirez, a man in his 40s with dark hair, slicked back, a stocky frame, and sharp brown eyes that had seen too much of Portland's underbelly. Ramirez was pragmatic, skeptical of hunches, but known for his stubborn pursuit of evidence. He raised an eyebrow as Ethan entered with Rex. "Morning, Cole," Ramirez said, his tone dry. "Word is your dog's been sniffing out more than drug stashes lately." Ethan ignored the sarcasm. Rex tracked Daniel Miller near the shelter. "He found a jacket, cigarettes, and I've already logged the items as evidence. Miller's escalating. We need to find him before he makes his move. Frank exhaled heavily. All right, we'll make this official. Cole Ramirez, you'll lead the follow-up. Use the dog. If he can take us to Miller, we'll bring him in. With that, Ethan clipped Rex's harness, the word canine stitched boldly across the strap. Rex's ears pricked as if he understood that the hunt was no longer just instinct, but an assignment. By afternoon, the team was in the field. Ramirez drove the unmarked sedan while Ethan sat in the back with Rex, one hand resting lightly on the shepherd's broad shoulders. They began near the shelter, retracing the steps from where Rex had unearthed the jacket. The dog lowered his muzzle to the ground, inhaling deeply, then tugged sharply against the lead. Ethan's pulse quickened. Go on, boy. Find him. Rex led them down cracked sidewalks, past graffiti-stained walls, deeper into Portland's industrial quarter. The area was quiet except for the distant hum of trains and the occasional scurry of rats between dumpsters. Rusted warehouses stood like skeletons of another age, windows boarded, roofs sagging. Finally, Rex stopped outside an abandoned bar. The sign above the door, once reading the rusty anchor, now hung askew, its paint appealing. The front windows were shattered, covered in grime. Rex stiffened, growling low, then barked sharply, pulling toward the door. Ethan signaled Ramirez. This is it. He's been here. They entered cautiously, flashlights slicing through the gloom. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of old beer lingered faintly beneath layers of rot. Broken stools littered the floor, and a collapsed pool table leaned against the wall. In the corner lay a dirty mattress, a crumpled blanket, and empty cans. Daniel had been here. Rex padded forward, nose working furiously. He stopped near the bar counter where dried brown streaks stained the floorboards. Ethan crouched, shining his light closer. Blood, not fresh, but recent enough. Beside it lay a torn photograph. Ethan picked it up carefully. The picture showed Anna and Daniel, years younger, smiling stiffly with their arms around each other. The center of the photo had been ripped, Lily's corner gone. Ethan's jaw tightened. This was no ordinary hideout. It was a shrine of bitterness. Suddenly Rex barked, his claws scraping against the wood. He shoved his nose into a gap between the boards along the back wall. His body trembled with urgency. Ethan knelt, prying at the paneling until it gave way, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside lay a pistol, its metal dull, but deadly. No serial number. Illegal. Ethan pulled it out with gloved hands, holding it up for Ramirez to see. Well, Ramirez muttered, his skeptical tone now grim. That's not just trespassing. That's a felony. Ethan slipped the gun into an evidence bag, his heart pounding. He's planning something. We need to move fast. They swept the rest of the bar, but found no sign of Daniel himself. The trail was fresh, but he had slipped away perhaps only hours earlier. Still, items they recovered painted a clear picture. He wasn't just lurking, he was preparing. Back at the precinct, Ethan filled the evidence. The torn photo, the bloodstains, the hidden pistol, they all told the same story of a man unraveling, obsessed with control. Frank Harris leaned over the report, his face dark. This is enough to escalate. We'll issue a warrant. But Cole, he looked up, eyes narrowing. You know this means you'll get desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. Ethan glanced down at Rex, who sat at his side, ears pricked, eyes fixed on the room as though he could sense Daniel's shadow looming even there. Ethan's hand tightened on the leash. Then we'll be ready. That night, Ethan stopped by the shelter to update Anna. She sat in the common room, Lily asleep in her arms. The flicker of the television cast faint light over her face, weary but alert. When Ethan told her what they had found, the photo, the blood, the gun, she paled. He's not going to stop, Anna whispered. Her voice broke as she stared at Lily's sleeping face. He'd rather see me dead than let me go. Ethan crouched in front of her, his gray eyes steady. He's running now. He left the signs because he knows we're close. And with Rex on the trail, we will find him. You're not alone anymore. At his words, Rex padded forward, resting his head gently against Anna's knee. The shepherd's presence was a weight of reassurance. Anna let out a shuddering breath, her trembling hand stroking his fur. For a moment, her eyes softened as if the strength of the animal before her lent her enough courage to face another day. The courthouse air was heavy with the scent of old paper and polished wood. Ethan sat in the gallery with Lieutenant Harris, waiting as a judge reviewed testimony for a different domestic violence case. It was part of his duty, showing support for the prosecution, helping shape precedent, demonstrating that law enforcement took abuses seriously. He wanted to be present for Anna, but duty had called him here. He checked his watch, anxiety nagging at the back of his mind. At the same time, across town, Anna had been scheduled for a follow-up examination at Portland General Hospital. Sarah Donnelly had accompanied her, insisting no woman in Anna's condition should go alone. Sarah's presence, tall and calm, gave Anna some comfort. Sarah carried herself with an air of quiet authority, her green eyes ever watchful, her auburn silver braid swaying as she walked. She had built her life around protecting women from men like Daniel, and though she rarely showed fear, she knew the danger was real. Anna, still thin and wary from weeks of running, pushed Lily's stroller gently through the hospital's bright hallways. The baby stirred under a soft pink blanket, her tiny fists clenching as if she sensed the unease that gripped her mother. Anna's sweater sleeves were tugged down over her wrists, concealing the bruises she still carried like shadows of her past. She tried to focus on the sound of Lily's gentle breaths, grounding herself. Beside them padded Rex. Ethan had made the decision that morning. No matter where Anna went, Rex would go too. The shepherd's harness gleamed, his samber eyes sharp as he scanned each passerby. Patients smiled faintly at him as they shuffled past, but Rex didn't break his focus. His bent ear twitched at every sound. He was a soldier of silence, carrying out his duty without question. Sarah guided Anna into the examination room, where a nurse named Janet greeted them. Janet was in her early 30s, petite with short black hair tucked neatly under her cap. She had a soft, musical voice and a reassuring smile, the kind that could soothe even the most frightened patient. She took Lily briefly to weigh her, cooing gently as the infant fussed, then returned her quickly to Anna's arms. "She's strong," Janet said warmly. "Healthy heartbeat. You're doing well despite everything." Anna managed a fragile smile. But outside that room, the hospital was not as safe as it seemed. Daniel Miller had been watching for days, thin, wiry, and unshaven. His once dark eyes now burned with manic obsession. He had learned Anna's routines, shadowed her steps, and today he found his chance. Dressed in a dark hoodie and cap, he moved through the hospital corridors with a purpose that should have raised alarms but didn't. He muttered under his breath, his hand brushing the pocket where a blade rested, concealed but ready. As Sarah stepped out to speak with the doctor about resources for Anna's case, Daniel slipped into the hallway near the exam room. The door creaked, faintly as it pushed open. Anna's eyes widened, her body stiffening as the figure she feared most stepped into the light. "Nah!" Daniel snarled, voice low and venomous. "You thought you could run from me? Thought you could hide my daughter from?" Anna gasped, clutching Lily tight against her chest. "Please don't!" Her voice cracked, barely audible. Daniel lunged, but Rex was already moving. The shepherd leapt between them, his teeth bared, a growl ripping from his chest like thunder. He struck Daniel mid-stride, knocking him against the wall. Daniel cursed, swinging his arm, his fist connected with Rex's shoulder in a brutal blow. The dog staggered, but didn't retreat. He lowered himself again, lips peeled back, a snarl vibrating deep in his throat. He planted himself in front of the crib where Lily's blanket peeked out. Daniel, eyes wild, raised the blade. "Move, you damn mutt!" Rex launched forward, jaws snapping around Daniel's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Daniel shouted in pain, trying to shake the dog free, but Rex held firm, muscles rippling with determination. His bent-ear flicked, his scarred legs straining, but he refused to let the man pass. The commotion drew the attention of hospital staff. Nurse Janet screamed for security, rushing to pull Anna further back into the corner. Anna, shaking violently, shielded Lily with her own body, whispering frantic prayers. 2 security guards burst in moments later. One was Mike Callahan, a burly man in his late 40s with salt and pepper stubble, known among staff for his gruff but reliable nature. The other was Troy Gwynn, younger, lean, and fast, a former athlete with quick reflexes and steady hands. They tackled. Daniel, as Rex, released his wrist, the shepherd still snapping near his face to keep him subdued. Ethan arrived seconds later, his heart hammering as he sprinted down the corridor, called from court by an emergency alert on his radio. His gray eyes darkened when he saw Daniel pinned to the floor, Rex circling with bared teeth. Ethan grabbed Daniel's arms, twisting them behind his back with practiced force, snapping cuffs over his wrists. "Daniel Miller, you're under arrest for attempted assault and possession of a weapon. You're done," Daniel spat, his voice with rage. "You can't keep her from me. She's mine. She'll always be mine." Ethan leaned down, his voice low, icy. "Not anymore." Rex growled one last time before Ethan called him off. The shepherd obeyed instantly, stepping back but remaining alert, his eyes never leaving Daniel until officers escorted him away. In the aftermath, the exam room was filled with trembling breaths and the rustle of paper as nurses tried to restore calm. Sarah rushed back in, her face pale, her braids swinging as she hurried to Anna's side. She wrapped an arm protectively around the younger woman. "He can't hurt you now," she whispered firmly. "He's in custody." Anna collapsed into tears, clutching Lily so tightly the baby squirmed. "If not for Rex," she whispered. She looked down at the shepherd, who sat beside the crib, panting but uninjured, save for a bruise forming on his shoulder where Daniel had struck. His eyes softened when Anna reached out, her trembling fingers brushing through his thick fur. Ethan crouched beside them, his voice gentler than it had been all day. "He stood his ground for you both. That's what he does. That's who he is." Rex leaned his head into Anna's palm, his scarred leg trembling slightly, but his eyes shone with something deeper than instinct: devotion. For the first time, Anna allowed herself to believe the nightmare might finally be ending. The courthouse, in downtown Portland, loomed like a fortress of gray stone against the cloudy morning sky. Reporters and onlookers clustered near the steps, their murmurs mixing with the echo of shoes on marble. Domestic violence trials were not usually public spectacles, but the details of Daniel Miller's case, the attempted assault in a hospital, the illegal firearm, and theft of a woman and her infant saved by a K-9 had caught the attention of the community. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of old wood polish and ink. The benches were nearly full with advocates from women's shelters, fellow officers, and a few curious citizens who had followed the story through the local news. At the front sat Judge Margaret Holloway, a stern woman in her early 60s with short, silver hair and a gaze that could silence even the rowdiest courtroom. Her reputation was one of fairness tempered with steel. She had handled countless cases of abuse and never tolerated manipulation. Anna sat in the second row, her hands clasped tightly around a tissue, Lily resting against her chest. She wore a plain blouse and cardigan donated by the shelter, her hair brushed but still damp with morning nerves. Fear lingered in her eyes, but today there was also a spark of resilience. Beside her sat Sarah Donnelly, upright and calm, a quiet pillar of strength. On the floor at Anna's feet lay Rex, harness strapped securely, his amber eyes watchful as ever. His scarred leg rested awkwardly, but his body was poised, ready to rise at the slightest threat. When Daniel was led in, shackled at the wrists, murmurs rippled across the room. He looked gaucher than before, his dark hoodie replaced by the orange jumpsuit of county custody. His beard was fuller, unkempt, his eyes wild with simmering anger. He scanned the room until he found Anna, and his lips curled into a twisted grin. Anna looked down immediately, trembling. Rex let out a low, warning growl that carried across the quiet courtroom. The bailiff shot a glance but said nothing. Many present seemed to welcome the sound. The prosecution was led by Assistant District Attorney Karen Lee, a sharp-minded woman in her 40s with neatly tied black hair and rectangular glasses. Known for her meticulous preparation and clear arguments, Karen had built a reputation as one of the county's fiercest advocates for victims of abuse. Her stack of files was neatly arranged, color-coded, and she carried herself with unwavering confidence. The defense attorney, Mark Sullivan, was younger, perhaps mid-30s, with slick blonde hair and an expensive suit that seemed to overcompensate for his inexperience. He specialized in plea bargains, but it was clear he had drawn the short straw defending Daniel. His nervous habit of adjusting his tie betrayed his discomfort. The trial proceeded with witness testimony. Ethan was the first to speak. In uniform, with Rex sitting obediently by his side, he described the night he found Anna and Lily in the alley. His voice was calm, deliberate, yet carried an undercurrent of emotion as he detailed Rex's discovery of the lighter, the hidden firearm, and the confrontation at the hospital. Photographs of the torn family picture and the illegal gun were presented, their weight filling the room with silence. Karen Lee asked Ethan, "Officer Cole, would you say your K-9 partner's role was instrumental in uncovering evidence and preventing further harm?" Ethan glanced down at Rex, who raised his head proudly. "Yes, Rex is more than a partner. He saved Anna's life twice." A murmur of agreement spread through the benches. Even Judge Holloway allowed herself a brief, softened expression. Anna was called. Next. Her voice shook, but Sarah's steady presence beside her and Rex's quiet form at her feet gave her courage. She described the years of fear, the bruises hidden beneath sleeves, the threats whispered at night. At one point, she broke down, clutching Lily, but the courtroom remained silent, absorbing her truth. When she finished, she wiped her tears and whispered, "I just want my daughter safe." Daniel erupted then, slamming his cuffed fists against the table. "She's mine! She'll always be mine!" His voice rang out, venomous. The bailiff and two deputies moved quickly, forcing him back into his seat. Judge Holloway's gavel cracked against the block. "One more outburst, Mr. Miller, and you'll be removed from this courtroom." Her voice cut through the air like ice. The defense offered little. Sullivan stammered about Daniel's difficult upbringing and emotional instability, but the evidence was overwhelming. The illegal firearm, the hospital attack, and Anna's testimony sealed his fate. After closing arguments, Judge Holloway's verdict was swift. "Daniel Miller, this court finds you guilty of felony assault, illegal possession of a firearm, and repeated acts of domestic violence. You are hereby sentenced to 20 years in state prison. Furthermore, a permanent restraining order will be in effect, barring you from any contact with Anna Miller or her daughter." The courtroom erupted in quiet murmurs. Anna gasped, tears streaming. Freely, but this time they were tears of release. She buried her face in Lily's hair, her body shaking with relief. Sarah placed a steady hand on her back. Rex shifted, pressing his head against Anna's knee. She looked down through blurred vision to see his eyes gazing up at her calm and steady. Lily stirred, reaching out her tiny fist and clutched at the fur around Rex's collar. The baby cooped softly, as though she knew instinctively who her protector was. The sight moved the entire courtroom. To many present, Rex wasn't just a dog. He was justice embodied, loyalty made flesh. Even Judge Holloway allowed herself a small nod in the shepherd's direction before adjournment. As the courtroom emptied, Anna whispered through tears, "We're safe now." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his gray eyes gentle. Rex sat beside them both, the quiet guardian who had carried them through the storm, his presence now a symbol of survival and hope. Spring unfolded slowly in Portland, washing away the damp shadows of winter with soft sunlight and the scent of blooming magnolia. The courthouse chapter of Anna's life had closed with Daniel's sentencing, and though nightmares still stirred in the quiet hours of night, daylight carried the promise of something she had thought impossible: safety. The shelter had been her home for several weeks, but now she was ready for the next step. With Sarah Donnie's encouragement and Ethan's steady guidance, Anna found herself at the Maple Street Community Center, a modest brick building where murals of painted hands and bright doves covered the walls. The center offered after-school programs, food distribution, and classes for struggling families. Anna was nervous as she walked in for her first day of volunteer work, Lily in her arms and Rex pacing at her side. She wore a simple navy blouse and dark slacks donated by the Sense clothing drive, her brown hair tied back in a loose ponytail. Though her frame was still fragile, her posture was straighter than it had been weeks ago. There was a softness in her face when she looked at Lily and no longer ruled only by fear, but by determination. The director of the center, Elaine Porter, greeted her at the door. Elaine was in her late 50s, plump with rosy cheeks and curly gray hair that framed her round face. She had a warm laugh that filled the hall before she even spoke, and a kind of non-nonsense energy that made everyone feel immediately at ease. Elaine had grown up in Portland's working-class neighborhoods, seen poverty firsthand, and dedicated her life to ensuring no child went hungry under her watch. "Anna Miller?" Elaine asked, her voice cheerful yet kind. "Welcome. Sarah told me you'd be helping out. We could use a steady hand in the food pantry. And is this little one Lily?" She leaned closer, smiling at the infant. Lily cooed softly, clutching at her blanket. Rex sat beside Anna, massive yet calm, his tail giving a single wag. Elaine chuckled. "And you must be Rex. I've heard about you, the hero dog." She bent down cautiously, letting Rex sniff her hand before patting his head. "You're welcome here too, big guy." Over the following weeks, Anna settled into a rhythm. She organized shelves in the pantry, helped hand out bags of groceries, and sometimes read to the children in the after-school program. Her voice was quiet at first, but the children leaned in close, drawn by the gentle warmth in her storytelling. Lily often lay on a blanket nearby, giggling whenever Rex patted over to nudge her toys back toward her. The German Shepherd had become a fixture at the center, his bent ear and scarred leg making him all the more beloved. Children often whispered, "That's the dog that saved them," and clung to his fur without fear. One afternoon, a boy named Tyler, no older than 10, shuffled shyly toward Rex. Tyler was small, with messy blonde hair and a nervous habit of tugging hiss leaves down over his hands. He had been coming to the center for months since his father's incarceration, often quiet but watchful. In his hand he held a leather collar burned into the strap with clumsy letters, was a single word: guardian. Tyler knelt before Rex, holding it out with trembling hands. "My grandpa taught me how to use the wood burner," he explained softly. "I thought maybe he should have this because he protects people." Rex sniffed the collar, then licked Tyler's fingers. Ethan, who had arrived to check in on Anna that afternoon, fastened the collar around Rex's neck. Against the shepherd's sable fur, the word gleamed like a badge. "Hearned it," Ethan said, his storm-gay eyes softening. Anna smiled, her hand pressed against her heart as Lily clapped her tiny hands, giggling at the sight. That evening, after the day's work was done and the center grew quiet, Ethan offered to walk Anna and Lily home to the small apartment provided through a housing program. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of amber and rose. Anna pushed Lily's stroller while Ethan walked beside her, Rex trotting between them, his new collar gleaming in the fading light. They paused at a park bench under a blooming cherry tree. Anna sat, lifting Lily onto her lap. The baby reached out for Rex's bent ear, tugging playfully. The shepherd endured with patient dignity, lowering his head so the child could lean against him. The sight pulled laughter from Anna's lips, a sound Ethan had never heard from her before. She turned to him then, her brown eyes shimmering. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "For everything, for believing me, for keeping us safe," for she trailed off, her gaze shifting to Lily, who now curled drowsily against Rex's thick fur. Ethan looked at her quietly for a moment, then shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks. You did the hardest part. You survived, and you're building something new for her. That's more than enough." Their eyes met, and for the first time the space between them carried not just duty or gratitude, but something unspoken, something fragile yet hopeful, a possibility. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Rex stretched out. Between them, his body forming a bridge between the officer, the young mother, and the child he had sworn to protect. The collar around his neck glinted with the single word that captured his essence: guardian. For Anna, Lily, and Ethan, the future remained uncertain. But in that moment, wrapped in the golden glow of twilight, they allowed themselves to believe in peace, in healing, and in the quiet beginnings of a new life. Sometimes the greatest miracles are not found in grand gestures, but in the quiet moments when love and courage rise against fear. Anna's survival, Lily's laughter, and Rex's unwavering loyalty remind us that God often sends his protection in ways we least expect, through people, through second chances, even through the faithful heart of a dog. In our daily lives, we may not all face the same battles, but each of us knows what it means to walk through hardship and hope for light. This story is a reminder that no darkness lasts forever, and that with faith, resilience, and the grace of God, new beginnings are always possible. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a reminder of hope. Comment below where you are watching from. And if you believe in miracles and the power of God's protection, type Amen in the comments. And if you want more stories of courage, love, and redemption, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join this community. May God bless you and keep you safe today and always.